When you find that perfect piece, you really just want to sell everything else. You want to clear out and just lean on that piece. There's something very refreshing about like knowing this one piece can serve what 5 pieces served. I love the idea, and obviously in theory it could be perfect.
Welcome back to The Materialist. I'm Mark Bridge, the founder and CEO of At Present, Matchmaker to Extraordinary Jewelry, and I am your host. Last week, we had the great pleasure of hosting a series of events in Los Angeles with our friends at Veronica Beard. As part of our celebration of all things LA, we held a dinner at the Hotel Bel Air. One of the guests at our dinner was Ali Pew, highly accomplished brand strategist, creative director, and stylist, known for, among other things, shaping the editorial vision of Goop. The morning after the dinner, I had the opportunity to sit down with Ali to talk about changes in the editorial world, lifestyle brands, and the emotional power of jewelry. I hope you enjoy this conversation about all things material, as well as my fascination with the California lifestyle and the Erewhon smoothie. Welcome to The Materialist. The sun is finally coming out. Hello, Ali.
Hi, finally. Welcome to LA.
I am delighted to be here and nice to see the sun. Maybe start because this is something that is both fascinating and foreign to me that I think you are aware of. But like this whole California lifestyle and this wellness thing and $18 smoothies. Mm-hmm. What is that about?
I know, isn't it crazy? I think I hate to defend an $18 smoothie, but I do buy it.
It's really good.
I drink them. I go and I buy them and I drink them because they taste good. And they kind of, if you're feeling like a little tired, or if you're feeling, like you just need like a pick me up, or, it's like such an easy solve. And I mean, I like really am affected by caffeine. So it's kind of like I opt for it instead of caffeine usually.
And you spent a fair bit of time in the Goopiverse.
Yeah,
I don't know if that
6
is
years.
the term.
Yeah.
Is there a term for it?
I mean, yeah, Goopiverse. I mean, I always say like goopy, like everything felt like very goopy.
That is a description of a thing,
yes,
or a world or
in the wellness. Yes. Yeah. But I was there for 6 years.
And did you bring that kind of sense of the world with you in? Was that already there? How did that develop?
It definitely was not already there. My whole background is fashion editorial. So when I came onto Goop, that was my focus. And I remember I sat down at my desk on the first day, and I wish I could remember the exact title of the book, but it was something like Eat Dirt. And I was like, who put this book on my desk?
What am I supposed to do with this?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, and what does it mean?
Is this the hazing ritual
and, yeah,
here?
exactly. It felt like this like really funny intro to the brand and to like the office environment. And then as I continued with the job and in the environment and around all of it, there's definitely things I adopted and definitely things that I just kind of, like I always stayed so focused and so much in fashion with the company. But there were certain things, of course, like being around it, you're going to become more interested in. And I would say I lightly dabbled always. I was never into anything too intense, but you weren't going to find me, smoking mushrooms in Jamaica. But I was.
You were not a consumer of the egg.
No, definitely not. But I got really into lymphatic massages or anything skincare wise, and really learning about the formulas of skincare, and more like lightly touched on it. But it was like such a learning curve at first to learn all these wellness things. And the food, I think like it was really, I think also that's very LA to like, we have so much exposure to the best produce and so much good, healthy food here. And obviously that's a big part of the Goop universe, and they have Goop Kitchen. So I definitely, when I moved to LA, I really enjoyed that part of it too.
I want to come back to Goop, but I want to start earlier. Where did you come from? Where did you grow up, and how did you catch the fashion bug?
So I grew up in Salt Lake City, and I would say early on, I was into fashion, but I didn't know really what it meant or what I wanted to do in it. But I remember I had actually an InStyle magazine where I ended up working, and I like it was like I had one issue and I probably looked at it for 2 years. Like it wasn't at all of the moment or
Where
anything.
did it come from? Was that something that was in your house or like
I think
did
it
you
was
find
just
it in
in
the
my
library?
house. I think it was in my house. Probably I have older sisters, so maybe from one of my older sisters or something. I don't know where it came from, but I just remember like flipping through an InStyle magazine and I thinking in my head, like, I want to be that person who picks these clothes. I didn't even know if that was a real job at the time. It was, but I didn't know that.
But you had some sense.
I did. I had a sense. For college, I wanted to do like an art degree or a fashion degree. My parents really wanted me to make sure I had a bachelor's before I went and did any like degree that wasn't a bachelor's degree. So I did my bachelor's degree, and then I ended up just moving to New York and getting an internship at Condé Nast Traveler, which was like very lucky. They like really took a chance on me. And then it just kind of evolved from there. And I kind of worked my way through Condé Nast. I worked at a lot of different Condé Nast magazines.
What do you do as a baby editorial assistant? I don't know. You probably don't start in the mailroom like you did at William Morris in 1956. But
yeah,
if you show up as a 22-year-old at Condé Nast, what
it
do
was
you
the
do?
fashion closet. That's where I started.
It is the mailroom, yeah.
Yeah, so it basically is. Yes, it's just with clothes, not mail. I started in the fashion closet. I was an intern at Condé Nast Traveler, and then I was a fashion assistant at Lucky magazine. And I was sample trafficking. I was checking in on the clothes and prepping them for shoots and then sending them back to the brands and learning the industry that way. And that was really like, I knew nothing. I had just moved to New York and I really knew nothing. So it was a really good baseline learning of what magazines and fashion editorial looked like. I was at Lucky magazine and then as a fashion assistant, and then I went to W magazine. I assisted Alex White, and so I got a lot of exposure to photo shoots, which I loved and I found very inspiring, and I kind of figured out that's what I wanted to do. Then I got a position at Condé Nast Traveler as a fashion editor, and that was actually an amazing introduction into all things fashion shoots. It was planning with production. We were shooting in these like far off locations and planning start to finish the entire shoot, just me and my boss. And it was really like, we went to the most amazing places, and it was such like a dream job looking back. We would go for 6 or 7 days and spend a couple days scouting and then spend a couple days shooting. And
was there a unique viewpoint that Traveler had on fashion? Those are two adjacent categories.
Yes.
And often people who like travel also are invested in fashion.
Yeah.
But as you're thinking about fashion within a travel title.
Yeah.
How do you
At
think about
that time, it was very much more fantasy. It was very much these, we did a riverboat. This was in like 2013 we did, or 2012, we did a riverboat down the Amazon, and it was just our crew on the boat, and then we would take these small boats down through lily pads, and we did a shoot in Krakow, Poland, where we were in a salt mine that was thousands of feet underground, and this kind of whole gothic thing like was the shoot concept. So it was very much like fantasy and nothing very literal, but it was such an introduction for the reader to see these places in a totally different perspective and with kind of this high concept, more of like a feeling of the place, less about the literalness of the place.
And what is the brief of something like that? They're like, hey, go do something on Poland and find something really cool and, maybe find a hat to go with it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the magazine is very in tune with like up and coming places. And my boss at the time was, very in touch with many different people all over the world and kind of navigated that way. It was very much word of mouth, I would say. And oftentimes it was also inspired from the collections. If there was a Saint Laurent collection that was inspired by a certain place, we would go and do a shoot in that place. And it was such a good experience. And I kind of learned the whole spectrum from start to finish about photo shoots and editorial and how it all worked from start to finish. So it's because we were such a small team.
And what does success look like in something like that? Is it an artistic question? Is there some KPI of the right people like this, or people bought more suitcases?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, with a magazine like that, at that time, it was very much artistic. It was very much about creating beautiful imagery that inspired people that they wanted to have on their coffee table. Of course, there was a business. You had advertisers you wanted to please, and you had readers that you obviously wanted to grow. And and inspire. But I think at the end of the day, at that time, magazine was very much still about an artistic point of view. At least Condé Nast Traveler was. I think, after Condé Nast Traveler, I was at InStyle, and that felt more tangible, more literal, more also in the digital space at that time. And that kind of felt like there was more obvious deliverables that was needed. And also because InStyle is so connected to celebrity and, what they're doing and what they have coming up. So.
And you see that the world is changing.
Yes, as I was at InStyle, I caught on.
What did you see? What did you feel?
I felt digital was obviously moving at such a fast pace at that time. And I remember even my dad said to me, like, you're working at a magazine and everything's digital now. And we, even at InStyle, our magazine was still doing so well at that time. This was 2014, 15, 16, 17. And InStyle was doing really, really well at that time. But the digital space was just becoming so much wider and so much bigger. And a lot of editors were moving over to doing different digital jobs. And I think that it just felt like time to do something not only different from digital versus print, because that was always like such a thing in magazines, but I think also for me, I really I loved fashion and I love clothes, and I wanted to find a place to like really lean into that. And Goop really offered something that an editorial space didn't, where it was a brand and they had their own collection and they have an e-commerce site of full fashion buy. And so it just took what I knew in editorial and could apply it to something much more tangible and literal and as a really, growing business.
And so you come out to LA and they give you the dirt book and they say, all right, Ali, go forth.
Yeah.
You look at this project and you say, all right, what can this become?
Yeah, it was exciting. Goop was growing so much at that time, and they had their own collection, which was really exciting. They had the e-commerce site. Editorial really was driving everything. So it was kind of saying, this is our content. These are things. This is our point of view. This is our offering you a service of what we love and, literal things, how to wear it and where you're wearing it and what to pack to go here. And it was very serviceable and literal, which I appreciated. It was practical. And then the layer that you could just buy it right there when it was coming in your inbox, and then you could click through to the site. And then obviously all other platforms, it was amplified on. So it was nice to kind of have that initial editorial point of view, but then for it to translate into business, into, creative, all different aspects of Goop.
And was that the right model for this sort of editorial world?
I think it was it still is. I think it's a good model for the editorial world. I think it, nothing's perfect and everything evolves so quickly. And now there's so many other platforms and there's so many other ways to build a brand, whether it's editorial or, a classic brand with product or an e-commerce site. So, yes, in that time, I think that was a proper way that was like an exciting new way to do it with so many different, we called like verticals, like so many different categories and like a full 360 picture. But I think now, as everything changes so quickly. So now there's so many more options than there was even 5 years ago to build your business and to kind of which avenue to take. So
I think both magazines and Goop, whatever that is, sort of editorial e-commerce, serve an important role in curation.
Yeah.
And particularly as you have an explosion of things that exist in the world, having a viewpoint is actually really powerful. And I remember, the Goop travel app, and I loved having that. All right, you land somewhere and what is around me? And I kind of know what it is that I'm going to find here. And it was way better than TripAdvisor, where I don't want 850,000 places. I want a couple of places that I can walk around for a couple hours and find something that's interesting.
It was trusted. Like, you trusted that point of view.
Yes.
You leaned on that. And that, I feel like, kind of went across all verticals of Goop. Like, I love the travel example because I feel like Goop was really known for that. And then everyone trusted that the beauty was going to be clean. And then with fashion, that it was going to be quality. And also Gwenna's point of view, she is so involved in everything at the company. So it was, she really is picking the clothes that are on the site.
Is that then a limit to growth? All right, we have created a curated worldview. I am either in the club or I'm out of the club. And once I have all of my club members, what do I do?
Yeah, and I do think it obviously limits growth, but I think you have the right, and I think that, I'm not speaking directly to Goop exactly, but I think in any context, you have the right group of people and then you can grow. And I think that's what I found too, is I have, moved on from Goop and have a Substack and, other things that I'm doing. I always feel like if I have a loyal group and if I have a group that cares about what they're buying and that cares about, the scope that I care about, then I do think you can grow.
And so the world now is one of platforms, and within those platforms, I can pick a worldview. Is that how you see where we're sitting today?
I do like that you can do that. I like that Instagram, you scroll and you get so much random, some stuff you want to see, some stuff you don't. Sometimes I appreciate my algorithm. Sometimes I hate my algorithm. If I ever venture to TikTok, usually I kind of hate my algorithm, but
and much of your life after you've spent time watching it.
Yes. The 30 minutes are gone in a flash. But I do, it's one of the things with Substack I really appreciate, that you can pick, you can subscribe, you choose to have that newsletter in your inbox, you pay for it, usually, hopes that we pay for it, and you're picking your point of view. And I think that that's something that we don't always do because we're always served an algorithm. So it is something that I appreciate about a lot of things that are kind of bubbling up like Substack.
And along with the development in your career and the change in the media landscape, is your sense of style evolving along the way? Or, did you, leave Utah and all right, this is who I am?
Honestly, I think of course it evolved. And I think at that point in your life, when you're 21, 22, and you're moving to New York, you don't know who you are. You don't know what your style looks like. But I think pretty quickly after I was in New York, I learned what I gravitated toward. I'm such a gut instinct person that I find it very easy to go with my gut and to trust my taste. And so it pretty much has, I would say, stayed pretty consistent since my first couple years in New York. Yes. It of course evolves. You find new brands you like, designers at houses change. But I think for me, I'm pretty disciplined and I know exactly what I like and what I feel good in. And that's kind of the idea of my Substack uniform, is to kind of find what your style is, what you lean on, what you feel confident in, and you kind of have that discerning taste for yourself. No matter the style, you just kind of can narrow in. I think it's there's a nice emotional side of it and then also a nice practical side. It makes things a little bit easier.
Do you feel like your work has gotten closer to you as time has progressed? That, maybe, I don't know, maybe given your druthers, you would be floating down the Amazon, staging couture fashion shows. But that seems, all right, that is a world. I am building a world.
Yeah.
In Goop, all right, I am participating in a community world. And now your world is, I am Ali Pew's uniform.
Yeah.
This is you, or
Yeah.
this is some version of you.
Yeah, I know. I toy with that because I lean on just like I said, I lean on my gut. I lean on my taste quite a bit. And I always have in my career. When I was at magazines, I always trusted my taste. When I was at Goop, my taste was very aligned with the brand. And, I always trusted that. Now I always toy how much of uniform or how much of the work I'm doing in my other projects outside of uniform, how much of anything I'm doing is me and how much of it is my work. And, usually I kind of lean more on my work because I don't love to put myself out there that much. It's funny. I think I started out uniform taking photos of myself, without a mirror, not as a mirror selfie, just as myself. And
Tell me what the difference is there.
like having the camera, I started out having the camera to me. So there was it wasn't a mirror selfie.
Okay.
And now I've just decided to do a mirror selfie because something about that feels a little more effortless and almost taking myself out of it. I don't know why. There's something less formal about it. So I feel like it takes me out of it a little bit. And maybe it's even having that mirror between me and the actual camera is removing myself a little bit. That's such like a weird mental thing. But I definitely do toy with this. How much is me and how much is my work? And I really lean on my career and my knowledge of the industry. So that's something that I try to always apply to myself anyway. So it's a balance, and I think right now a lot of people are kind of who come from a fashion background because the fashion industry has changed and everything is moving so quickly now. I think a lot of people kind of toy with that. And some people have gone influencer route and some people have gone and they work in-house at a brand and people have done different things. So I kind of feel like right now I have a few things that I'm doing and uniform is kind of a compilation of those things with a little bit of me.
There's so many things there that I'm so fascinated by. This idea of, I don't know, I'm thinking about it in terms of buying or selling, and maybe you wouldn't think about it in those terms, but like, what are you offering me as a reader? Are you offering me, this is how I live my life, and you can choose to do with it as you like? All right, I see somebody who's aspirational. Are you offering me a philosophy of this is the way to think about your world? Or is that even the wrong way of thinking about it?
No, I think both those are actually the correct way of thinking about it. I definitely am offering a philosophy. Like I very much believe in a uniform philosophy.
And for those who, I imagine that some of the people listening are very familiar with this, but can you give us the elevator pitch on, Ali's uniform?
Yeah. So basically it's...
Or the uniform, right? That's already sort of prejudicing the answer.
Yeah. The idea is that you find kind of I hate the word capsule because I think that feels limited and it doesn't have to be limited, but you kind of find your sense of style, what you rely on for everyday dressing. So it's pretty, like I know mine very well. And I think that's years of getting dressed for fashion industry things and years of knowledge of the industry. And I think a lot of people do know theirs, but I think it's also a lot of people don't. And it's hard to find. It's hard to find your sense of style. It's hard to find what makes you feel confident. And then it's hard to kind of like wrap it up and be like, okay, these are my 20 key pieces that I'm always going to lean on. And then of course I'm going to have 5 to 10 pieces that are maybe for special occasion or travel, or, I'm putting these in buckets. I'm not being literal about 20 or 30. I mean, that would be my dream to have 20.
But like, I guess that's the question. Is that sort of prescriptive, right? There is sort of the dogmatic Marie Kondo sort of, your life will be happy if you follow this 10-step plan.
Yeah. I mean,
do you think that's actually the platonic ideal?
I think it depends on your personality. I think for me, yes, I like to have things like very streamlined, very know that I have something to put on that I'm going to feel good in, and I think anyone's can look a little bit different, but I do think having some sort of, like you said, prescription, some sort of uniform that you can rely on will help you feel a little bit more confident or a little bit more yourself. I think oftentimes fashion gets confusing, like especially if you think about the fast fashion space, or it's, you can kind of pick up things and then you're like, or you're drawn to someone because someone else has it, and then you put it on and you head somewhere and then you're like, I don't feel like myself, I don't feel that great in this doesn't fit properly, kind of all these things that can happen, and then you don't feel great. And I think that the end goal is we want to like feel confident and feel good in what we have on, and so to have those kind of things you can rely on. And it doesn't have to be, my uniform is very minimalist, and I kind of like mix of feminine and masculine, and it doesn't have to be that. It could be floral pieces, or it could be jewel tones, or it could be things that are more character, around some sort of character. It can kind of be anything that works for you. But I think just kind of, it's more about navigating, what does my style look like and how can I really hone in on that to make my life easier.
There is a little bit of a delicious irony at the heart of having a capsule wardrobe or whatever it is that we want to call it, and having a perpetual need to create more content. If we found the perfect item of clothing, the thing that I put on every day and I feel the most me, I have one chapter of one book. Is there a contradiction or a paradox there?
Yes. And I do think whenever I see this capsule wardrobe philosophy around, I do feel like there is that kind of context around it. I think it's more about finding good quality pieces and then adding extensions, adding layers, adding textures. I very much lean on really specific pieces, and I wear them a lot. And I found it very refreshing with my newsletter that the reader appreciates that and is into that philosophy as well. I can see through what links they're clicking or responses and feedback, or that kind of data shows me that they want to buy quality things and they care about having beautiful things they love that are timeless and classic and they can wear for many years. So I think it's about finding the right pieces that are classic and that don't feel, and then you can add on it. Maybe there is a jacket for the season that you add to it, or this top or this pant, because of course you don't want to feel bored and you always want to feel like refreshed in your outfits every season, every week, or however you think about it.
And people are choosing to engage in the category because there is something that is fun about it.
Yeah.
And there's sort of like, I don't know. And I was just thinking about like, is there a dichotomy between fashion and style? You have used the term fashion. All right. I am a fashion editor.
Yes.
Are those two different things?
I think so. And that's the other thing that plays into it. Because I actually, most of my background has been more in styling. So that's the other thing that plays into it is, how are you styling those pieces? Because you can take one piece and style it infinite amount of ways. So that's another thing for me is when I started my Substack, I was really worried. I was like, my ideas are going to get repetitive. But now I found they actually don't. I am always styling things in new ways. And, I add to my wardrobe and maybe I sell something and, I'm always kind of in that rotation. So I think the ways you refresh are with styling and bringing in new pieces, selling old pieces, and kind of keeping that baseline as classic, timeless pieces that really are your go-to to feel good and feel confident.
What is the half-life on the perfect piece? And I think about this because, I don't know, the thing for me, I buy an enormous number of blue blazers.
Yeah.
I that for me is like, all right, when I find the perfect one, that feels like me. And so my
Have you
wife
found
thinks,
it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I keep buying more blue blazers. My wife thinks, and she's like, how many of the same thing do you have? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe this one is just a little bit better. I should probably get rid of some of the ones that I know are not. But is there something like that for you that you just, I think about it like gin rummy a little bit. Like you just keep drawing cards thinking that you're going to perfect your hand.
Yeah, no, it's true. This concept came because my best friend, Becky Malinsky, she also has a Substack that's great. It's called 5 Things. We actually have kind of had this conversation loosely for probably 15 years, but we kind of were talking about it in a much more in-depth way about how can we find, when you find that perfect piece, how you really just want to sell everything else. You want to, you kind of want to clear out and just lean on that piece. And there is something very refreshing about cleaning out your closet. There's something very refreshing about knowing this one piece can serve what 5 pieces served. So I love the idea. And obviously in theory, it could be perfect.
like all good theories.
Exactly. But there's always going to be alternatives and there's always going to be that need to find something new. And the other piece of it too is you're going to have that perfect piece. For example, I just did this week the perfect piece ballet flats, and I had the Alaïa Mary Jane ballet flats. I wore them for 2.5 years. I wore them to the ground. I loved them. They were perfect. And then I decided I needed to get a new pair that I'd kind of worn them out. And I decided I wanted something a little more nondescript. I wanted something a little bit more simple. And my Alaïa ones had the studs. So I bought a pair that had nothing on them and were very simple and classic. And I tried a bunch of other pairs at that time too. And then obviously my knowledge of 20 years of looking at Mary Janes at market appointments and for shoots. And
by the time you've seen the 25,000th Mary Jane, you
yes,
develop an opinion about what makes for a good Mary Jane.
Exactly. Found the perfect one for me. And then, of course, there's always going to be some alternatives that maybe someone is looking for that studded one now. And so they're going to go for the Alaïa. Or maybe they want to buy a pair that's more like $150 and they don't want to spend more than that. And so there's going to be a perfect pair for that. Or maybe they need a brown and not a black. And there's going to be... So do this newsletter series as a concept in theory. And then I do break down... But there are always going to be some alternatives.
And my sense is you've gotten to know your audience on Substack pretty well.
Yeah, it's interesting how quickly I've had my Substack a little over a year. And just from people emailing in feedback, comments, learning, my favorite thing is to go through and see what people click on. Whether they bought it, I just want to see what they clicked on because I think that tells you a lot.
And are you often surprised, or do you have a pretty good sense for, all right, this is going to hit?
I think initially I was very surprised at how much people seem to care about quality and classic timelessness. And I was so happy about that because that's my philosophy and that's what I really lean on. So I was very happy that people came to Uniform to find really great quality pieces that are going to last them a long time and they don't need to rebuy every year, every season, and they want to buy beautifully made clothes.
I'm fascinated by the established versus emerging dichotomy, and maybe that's because that's at the heart of my business. And it also gets to the sort of idea of maybe classic versus novel. I don't know, we were just looking before we jumped on here at a bracelet that I'm wearing that was made by my friends Adam and Heidi from James Banks. And you mentioned, all right, that looks similar to a known piece. Mm-hmm. It's important to me that it's not.
Yeah.
And it's important to me, I love the people who made it. But for most people, that feels like a daunting decision. Mm-hmm. I'm going to spend a lot of money on something that does not have the imprimatur of 50 years of brand history. Am I better off actually buying the known thing?
I think it depends. I actually touched on this in my recent newsletter because if you think about a ballet flat, you think about a Chanel ballet flat. That's kind of like the OG. It's quite perfect, actually. And I didn't buy that because it just, one reason, like I felt like it was a little girly. It wasn't quite my style. But I do think there's something to that. And I think that's also a style defining thing. I think you make that choice. Do I want to buy something that has this ultra classic style? Or do I want to buy something that has a little bit of a modern twist or something that has details that feel a little bit more connected to my style? Or I definitely do both, but I think that for me, usually I end up a little bit more novel, actually. I don't know. I just like things to feel a little bit, I think I'm a little bit more like I like a little sporty, or I like things that have texture, and sometimes the kind of classic, like iconic it piece is just a little too on the nose for me, where I like a little bit more something unique with it.
We constantly vacillate in sort of popular culture between minimalism and maximalism, or at least in the discussion of it, because I guess people need things to write articles about. When we are in one of those periods of maximalism, right, the number of stories, quiet luxury is over.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel a tinge of, maybe I should be wearing a lot more Versace?
I love Versace. I mean, a Versace blazer, a Versace suit is really good. No, I really know my style and I feel really good and confident in it. It definitely evolves. And I think I evolve in different ways. I think about the designers I lean on. I love Phoebe Philo. I love how she has evolved from where she was at Old Celine and where she is now. And you can see it in the textures and you can see it in the cuts and you can see this like new way. And it still is a minimal style, but there is something that more effortless about it. And same with, the Proenza guys. I'm so excited to see what they do at Loewe because I actually love Proenza and I wear a lot of it. They're really good commercial designers. They're really good runway designers too. So I'm excited to see what they do at Loewe. But I think that it's more, for me, it's more about style. And that's where I toy with what's work and what's me, because obviously in work, I'm going to be looking at and covering things that are all different parts of the industry and all different parts of fashion. And there's things that are relevant that I have no personal attachment to in that kind of emotional way or shopping literal way. But I think that there's always that through line that's you think about what Peter Mulier is doing at Alaïa, and that's something more high concept. And I wouldn't say necessarily super, I mean, it is minimal, but he does it in such a beautiful sculptural and conceptual way that it feels more like art down the runway and has that minimal backbone to it. But it's like what I want to buy now because it has that minimal touch, but then it feels much more sculptural and much more elevated. So I just think it's like the evolution of it more.
We have spent a fair bit of time thus far talking about fashion. I want to switch half a notch over, and I guess there's obviously a material notion of fashion, but to talk about other things. And maybe to start with non-clothing items in your life. Are there things of meaning, and do you think about those things in the same way that you think about fashion?
It's interesting. I actually don't think about like things in my home. I don't think about at all. I have a very disciplined closet and a very clear point of view. And then when it comes to things in my home, I feel like it's hard to design a home and it's hard to pick things and have them go together, where with my closet, that comes very naturally to me. I have a very good history of like amazing women in my family. And so I have quite a few. I have like a beautiful chair and I have some meaningful pieces. I had a baby this year and her bassinet was a bassinet that I slept in and all my sisters slept in and all my nieces and nephews slept in. I have 14 nieces and nephews and every baby has slept in this bassinet. When the fires broke out in LA and we were leaving our house and we kind of were gathering a couple things and I just thought, it's hard to think, what am I taking? And of course I had my jewelry and my husband grabbed his watches and we grabbed our passports and all those kinds of things. And then I looked at my closet and I was like, I don't need to take anything. I ended up like literally taking no clothes, not even to wear. It was very dysfunctional. But I really wanted to take this bassinet because it had traveled. I mean, my sister drove the bassinet from Salt Lake before my baby was born, and it had been driven to DC for a baby and to Northern California for a baby. So it's just made this way all the way down from my oldest sister all the way down to now my baby is the youngest in my family. So I have a few of those pieces that I really value and really create meaning. And I think those kind of pieces and some jewelry are really the things that are the most meaningful to me. But I definitely don't have the same discipline with my home. Whenever my husband or I want a piece of art or something, he's more creative and more interesting than I am, to be honest, and has a better sense of humor. So
what does interesting mean in that context?
He is highly creative and has the best sense of humor. And so he would pick some piece of art that was like, I would first look at and be like, this is so weird, or I don't get it, but he always knows that kind of stuff. And he's actually better with home stuff than I am. We do have some pieces that have been passed down through my family, and some vintage pieces that I found on First Dibs and things like that. But it's definitely not, I don't go on First Dibs and shop for fashion. So I definitely take a different angle when it comes to things in my home and other things around me.
And what are the things that you look for? Is it what it looks like? Is it what it does? Is it who made it, where it came from?
Probably the first thing is what it looks like. Like I still go with my gut on what I like and what my taste. And then I like to dig in who made it. Yeah, where is this coming from? Because on First Dibs, you're like paying triple for shipping than you are for the product. How it'll fit in with the other things. And I do a little bit more eclecticness in my home than I do in my closet. But yeah, I just roll with my gut on it. But it's not necessarily a clear style. I don't feel like my home has this really clear style. It has a mix of things. And like my grandma's china and things like that kind of are more meaningful and emotional to me.
Is there something people would be surprised about that you love that feels discordant with everything else?
I definitely have more print in my home. Like I reupholstered this chair recently that was my grandparents'. It's kind of this corner chair. And I reupholstered it in this Swedish, really over-the-top print that's loud. I always joke that like my alter ego is like in my china because it's all printed and colorful and floral and it looks nothing like my sort of like more masculine kind of pared back style. Yeah. And my baby's room is, I just bought what I loved. And it is like floral and gingham and bright colors and pastels. It's really cute, but it's really like a mix of different things.
So she is now 7 months old.
Yeah.
As you think about her growing up and her being in a family that seems to pay a lot of attention to the things that are around them, do you think about how you discuss that with her and what example you set?
Yeah. I think that growing up, I think my family also, I think about my parents, and I think they also relied on their taste too. And so I think me and my sisters always felt pretty confident in that. And we also always cared about meaningful. My mom always had pieces from her grandmother, and we always also had meaningful attachments to things. And it's all starting to get dispersed when my sisters show up and my parents were all eyeing. We want this. It always comes up.
There might be some sticky notes on the back of things.
Oh, yes. There's some names on things, and yeah. But I hope that's what she takes with her. And I think I can't imagine a world where she wouldn't, to be honest, because it's just so ingrained in me and ingrained in my family. And I'm very close with my family. You know, and I think having that in my space, 10 years ago, I didn't have as many things as I do now. And I think as the older I get and having a child, you really want to bring that into your space to know these are the meaningful pieces and these are things that this grandma had and this is what this grandma was like and that kind of thing. Versus, of course, like I am excited for her to have a bag that I've had for 10 years or things like that as well. But to know that that was a bag that I have and loved and used and wore a lot and wore in this way. But the meaning is really in some of the things that are carried down through my family.
Are you selecting things now with her in mind?
Yes. The first thing I did is I had this pendant made with her photo in it. And I did think I was choosing the shape, whether I was going square, rectangle, circle. And I just thought there's something about the circle that feels a little more classic. And I feel like I'm picking this piece for me, but I am picking it for her too, because I want her to have it. And I just felt like this, for some reason, the square and the rectangle were more specific, where the circle felt more classic. So definitely think about that. I don't know if I'll think about it with clothing. I hope that she'll enjoy the pieces I keep, but I think with jewelry,
there's a different level of sentiment, I think.
For sure. With jewelry, there's always a level of sentiment. It's such an emotional. I remember the first time I was with Condé Nast Traveler and I went to Basel, watched a jewelry show in Switzerland. And it was the first time I tried on like a high jewelry piece. And I remember I almost was like going to burst into tears. The emotion of having something that, cost aside, just the impactfulness that like a stone, the feelingness at bringing that on and wearing something so close to your skin like that is so meaningful and emotional. So I do feel like my jewelry purchases are much more emotional than any clothing or accessory and I love bags. Like I'm such a bag person, but there's something about a jewelry purchase that just feels very meaningful and emotional. And I'm excited for her to have those more than anything else.
What are you wearing today?
Today I'm wearing, I have an engagement ring from my grandma, which I'm very excited to pass down. And then my wedding ring stopped fitting after I got pregnant. So my husband got me just a diamond band, which I actually love. And then I have a Cartier Just Un Color ring and a Cartier Clash ring. And I love both of those. There's something they're the small sizes and they're very classic. And then I recently got this Tabayer ring that has some pave diamonds on it that's much more sculptural and a little more directional than I normally go. But I like the way it fits, to be honest. Like the sculptureness just sits nicely on your finger. And then I have a necklace from the brand Kloto with a diamond pendant. And then I have on the pendant that I got for her that's from Sherman Field, and it's a jade pendant, and it has her photo and her name and birth date engraved on it.
Are there things that are on the wish list?
Jewelry wise?
Yeah.
Honestly, right now, no. I feel like I also think with jewelry, with clothing, I always have things in the back of my head like, oh, I love this bag or this coat, or I'm on the lookout for this like full length wide leather pant. I'm on the lookout for it.
You have any suggestions?
Yeah. But with jewelry, when I see it, I fall in love with it. Yeah. And then you think about it for a little bit because it's a big purchase, and
spend 6 months justifying something you've already decided in your mind you're going to buy.
Exactly. Like this pendant, I knew 2 years ago, even before I was pregnant, that I was going to get this pendant. But of course, it takes you a minute to be like, okay, now I'm ready to get it.
Yeah.
But I think that you see it and you're just so emotional and you're like, I love that piece. I need to have that piece at some point. So I think I need to get my husband to do a new wedding ring so I have a proper wedding ring that fits my finger.
Yeah. Are there brands or designers or makers that you think are doing extraordinary work that deserve more attention?
In the jewelry space?
Or in the fashion space?
The fashion space is so much, like big luxury-wise, there's certain designers that I think are doing amazing things. I think Peter Mulier and Alaïa is amazing. I always loved Jonathan Anderson. I've always worn J.W. Anderson, Loewe, and now I'm excited. Well, rumors. I'm excited to see.
This is like, are we there yet? Are we there yet?
Yes.
The worst kept secret in the world.
I know, exactly. I am very excited for the Proenza guys to be at Loewe. It's such a weird time in these houses where everything feels up in the air. I always love Prada. That's like a go-to for me. I always love Miu Miu on the runway, and then I never actually want to buy it, but I always love it on the runway.
Why? What's the difference there?
I don't know. Maybe I guess like Prada translates to commercial so well, and I think Miu Miu, like it's so fun to see it in full look and the accessories that I would never wear. As far as like my core, what I wear all the time, I wear a lot of Totem, Maria McManus. I wear a lot of high sport. I love to see how she's evolved with knits and new things after the pant. And the pant is always great. And jewelry is one of those like discovery places. And that's why I love At Present. Like the discovery there is you guys carry designers that no one else carries. And you find designers that are doing new and interesting things. And I always like to I don't pick a jewelry because of the designer. I pick the jewelry because of the piece, where I think fashion, sometimes you end up picking it because of the designer because it's just easier to shop that way. But
is it because there's less cohesion in a jewelry collection?
I think so. And I think there's less, I think people obviously know the big jewelry houses and there's not as many as the big fashion houses. But I think there's just like an awareness level of jewelry that people don't know. And I think jewelry it's an art process. Jewelry designers are like artists in that way. So it's not like they're creating 1,000, pieces. They're creating each piece so individually. So I think the market is so wide with jewelry, but it's also, you kind of have to like navigate and find. It's also fun to mix and it can be more playful in that way, which is nice.
Just thinking back to something that you said about how there was a piece that you waited 2 years to buy and you needed an occasion. Do you think the same thing about buying a bag or buying knits? Or is there something jewelry that, all right, I need to ground this in something. I need to have a rationale? Is that maybe that's actually part of the value rather than a limiting factor?
Yeah, I think there's something really beautiful in that's how you're celebrating something is with jewelry. I think that's like it's such an obvious thing, like jewelry as a gift or jewelry for a meaningful moment or an anniversary or something meaningful in your life. But I think there's a reason that it's so obvious, because there is something nice about tying it to something that you're reminded of. And I think with jewelry, because it just sits so close to your skin, there's something about it that feels like more of a part of you than clothes. And it's also, most jewelry, I think for a lot of people, you wear every day. So you're putting this on with every outfit. You're putting it on whether you're being dressed up or more casual, so you're wearing it so much. And to wear something so much, you want it to feel just emotional and like it's connected to something more than just a sweater. Like when I put on this necklace and this pendant, it's connected to my daughter wherever, whether I'm with her or not.
Maybe. And I don't know. I'm struck that it's a double-edged sword, because a lot of people don't play in the category unless they have some grand reason. And I'm just struck by what feels to me like the difference between the emotional value that people get out of jewelry and the amount of time that they spend in the space. And I'm, of course, highly biased because I think that what we sell is extraordinary, and I think people should spend more time and money on it. But I just wonder about this sort of mindset that we have of you have to get above a certain threshold before I'm going to buy a piece of jewelry. You know, you don't have a child that often. You don't get married that often.
Right.
You know, you don't change jobs all that often. And I don't like the seasonality of the fashion business, and I think that's problematic also. But you know, how do we encourage people to play more often in a category that I think they're, you know, they're going to find additive joy in?
Yeah, no, I definitely think that people, when you get into that space, you do have so much more joy of putting on a piece of jewelry than you do anything else. There's just something about it. I think most women feel that way. I always love when women will, or I've done it a little bit here and there, you see something and you just buy it for yourself. You just are like, I'm just buying this for myself. I want this for myself. This brings me so much happiness and joy, and I'm just going to buy it like on a whim. But I think there's something really like special, and there's a confidence in that I think is really refreshing and nice. I also think like with jewelry, it's sort of multi-purpose. A lot of jewelry, earrings, you can obviously wear all different ways. And a lot of jewelry you can wear as a bracelet, or you can wear as a necklace, or there's things like that are like more playful and fun that sometimes aren't as obvious. Clothes are more obvious as like a styling tool. But I think jewelry is actually, there's a lot of room for playing and having fun with how you're wearing it too, that feels fun and new. But I agree. I think it's a much more emotional, happy purchase than, say, a bag or a shoe. I think as a general, most people feel that way.
I think it's a happier purchase, and I also think it's a happier long tail, right? That the value in my mind of a piece of jewelry is the least at the moment when you buy it. And it goes up the longer that you live with it. At least good jewelry does.
Yes.
There are some things, okay, here's a dopamine hit, fine.
Yeah.
But for something of meaning, the fact that I have worn it, the fact that my parent wore it, adds value to it over time, rather than, all right, well, I guess there's a hole in the sweater, or, you know, these jeans don't fit anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something that you know, it's obviously an investment, but you also want to keep it because it's meaningful and you want to hold it that way. And I think I just was going to buy a necklace, and as I was saying, I didn't have one on my list, but I actually did. But I didn't buy it yet. But they were like, oh, it's going to go up in price in a month. And I was like, what? I was like, what do you mean? So I think it's interesting that...
That's a sales technique, just so you know, because this is surprising to you to see behind the curtain.
I was trying to read between the lines.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think that as you get into it, you learn that. And I guess it's like art in that way, where I'm buying this. Gold is obviously, or silver, any kind of metal, you can track the price. But I think that's with art, you like buy something, you're thinking like, I'm buying this and in 10 years it's going to be worth this much more. And I think jewelry there's a couple bags that I think will do that, but not at the way jewelry does, and have you can Google the price of gold.
Yeah.
You know?
And at least as of yesterday, it was very expensive. So.
I know, as I learned from my necklace.
Totally. That's why the price is going up. So yes. I only say that partially cheekily. What's next?
What's next? Well, I don't know. To be honest, I left Goop in 2023 and I wasn't totally sure. I knew I wanted to start a newsletter. I knew I wanted to continue working with brands from a creative standpoint. And I really enjoy doing creative direction on product and creative direction for brands. And I also am the fashion editor Cultured, and that's been such a fun experience to be back in print editorial and back in kind of this sort of like mix of worlds with art and film and food. So right now, I feel like I have a good bucket of what I'm doing, where it's a mix of kind of a lot of my favorite things. And so I think I want to see where it goes, and I want to see what doors open up and what I'm ready to do. But I think the industry is also at a weird place too, where there's this nice mix of all these different types of ways to work in fashion, and everybody offers something different, and there's room for so much more. And I think it'll be interesting to see in the next couple of years what happens as, you know, luxury fashion changes, and then how that trickles down into how we're covering it and how we're seeing it in the digital space and that kind of thing.
What are the changes you're crystal balling?
Well, I do appreciate that print magazines have had this somewhat resurgence in the past few years. I think it's really refreshing. I think people like to have them as a book. I think people have them as a resource to learn about new things, and to sit and read a magazine is obviously very refreshing versus scrolling on your phone. I also like the idea of non-algorithm digital and finding things that resonate with you and finding people that you want to subscribe to that don't just pop up on your algorithm. And then I think on the flip side, there's a service to an algorithm and what pops up, what you're being tracked, and how it's servicing you in that kind of way. So I think media now has just gone so wide, and there's so many different ways to participate as both a creator, content creator, or a consumer reader. And I only think that those two worlds have obviously come so close together and meshed. But I also think that it's become more niche, and I think people appreciate finding their niche. And I always like when I find something I enjoy to read, or when someone finds me, or however it works.
Other than culture, do you have recommendations on? I always like picking up good magazines. What else should I have in my bag?
Well, I always love M. La Mode. Self-service, I always love. I'm trying to think what else. I think Homegirls does a really good job. 32C. I try to pick up a bunch of magazines when I'm in Europe.
Yeah.
And then, of course, bring home like a 30-pound carry-on bag full of magazines.
Bring another duffel bag for
Yes.
your magazines down the street.
Yeah.
Well, let's leave it there. Ali, such a delight. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
That's it for this episode of The Materialist. Thank you to Ali Pew and to the Hotel Bel Air for hosting us last week and giving this Seattle boy a taste of the California lifestyle. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and continue to listen for more conversations about the world of material culture. The Materialist is a presentation of At Present, Matchmaker to Extraordinary Jewelry.